So specifically what we want to focus on today is we're going to come from a place of community building 101. What does that look like? And what are the specific behaviors that you want to be concentrating on? How do you set things up from scratch? And what does that look like? So basic agenda for today, we're going to be talking about what the current state looks like for most organizations, not all, but for most. And then I want to talk about the ROI of community. That's obviously incredibly important. A lot of people are talking about community, but leadership is going to be very, very invested in wanting to know what value they're going to be able to gain from community, especially since it takes time and it can take resources. In addition, we're going to talk about what that actually looks like. What does community look like? I'm going to go over the community canvas on how to build out a minimum viable community. It's one of my favorite resources. I'm also going to go over a couple frameworks that I really like, and then I'm going to deconstruct a community that most of you have heard of and some of you are probably a part of. It does a really great job of showcasing the different elements of community. And then we're going to go over some pretty heavy slides. I know it's not nice to have a lot of text heavy slides, but those last ones, I think you'll thank me. We're going to go over a couple questions as to let's build a community from scratch. What sort of things do you need to be considering? What questions do you need to ask yourself? So without further ado, let's get started. So when we think about the current state for many, what you're going to see is there is a clear disconnect between current state and ideal state. And I think if you consider some of the brands that you're thinking about, that ones that you are either a customer of or an advocate of or something that you just generally love, I think that you're going to see some of these patterns showing up. And then really think about, I challenge you to really wonder, what would that brand have to do to make you feel more involved, to make you feel like you're more a part of a community versus a part of their audience? So what this looks like for most of us is it's one directional communication. See this a lot on social, where you'll see social brands have plenty of time to publish, but they don't take that time to communicate with each other. This becomes extra problematic when you see these long threads, especially on Twitter, where you have all of these separate brand accounts, and you see on TikTok too, where these different brand accounts will talk to each other, but then they won't talk to their customers. They won't talk to someone who's complaining, or they won't talk to someone who absolutely adores them. That one directional communication becomes a wall. It makes you feel less and less connected to those specific orgs. And so when you're thinking about this, I would challenge you to think about, what are the brands that you know would respond to you and which brands wouldn't? If you tagged them in a post or you mentioned them online, which are the brands that you have a pretty good feeling they would like your comment or they would respond to you versus the ones that you know for a fact they would completely ignore you? That goes down to that difference of audience and communication. If communication is one-sided, then that relationship is one-sided. You are their audience. You are there to hear them, not interact, versus community, which is something that's going to be more of a web. There's going to be more connective tissue there. There's going to be opportunities to feel like you are a part of a bigger piece. You don't have that as an audience. You're just a conduit for them to share their content with you. And there's no central connection space. Yes, I could go to Twitter, or yes, I can go on TikTok, or I can go on LinkedIn, but is there a core place where all of your fans, where all of your customers are going? And that all comes down to that last one. It's a lack of relationships. You don't just need their attention. That attention comes with time. That attention comes with them knowing that you are worthy of getting that attention. You've created those relationships. You've made the time. That's incredibly important. And if we look at that current state and we switch it over into where we're going, you're going to see the opposite. You're going to see that that's multi-directional communication. Not only are you going to talk to the brand and the brand will talk to you, but you're also going to create these connective relationships with other people who have commonalities with you. That commonality may be that you both love that brand, or you're both customers, or you're both customers from a specific location. But because of that brand, you're able to not only connect with them, but you're able to connect with others. And in that instance, the brand or the organization becomes a bridge. They are creating these synapses. They are creating these bridges for you to connect with others, and they are the commonality. They get to be that connector, which is incredibly empowering. And because of that, you wind up having a central place where they can connect. That could be their website. It could be a Facebook group. It could be a Slack channel. It could be a full-fledged community with a community platform. It could be an app where you can all talk to each other. It could be a video game where you can all go in and you can chat. It doesn't matter so much what the packaging looks like as what the experience is like. If I enter into this space, what does that feel like? How am I onboarded? When I go in, do I know what to do next? Or do I feel stupid? Or do I feel silly, like I don't know how to connect with others? By being that connector, you make them feel welcome. You let them know, here, welcome. Here are the different opportunities that you have here. Here are the different things that you can explore. You want to talk to somebody? You can go here and you can connect with these types of people. It's incredibly empowering because what you're doing is you're facilitating connection for them. You're giving them a space where they can learn more about you, but they can also learn more about others. And that behavior creates a sense of belonging. When you feel welcome, you feel appreciated, you know how to behave in certain ways within the space, and you have positive reciprocation of those behaviors, you feel like you belong. Oh, I found my people. I found the space where I'm wanted. That's an incredible emotional power. And when you have that, when you have those shared interests and behaviors and you feel like you're connecting with others, that is going to be a strong reason why you're pulled and you want to return. Starting a community is one thing. Having people join it is one thing, but then having them return and giving them a space that they want to return back to is hard. It's very difficult. We all have different motivations. We all have different desires. And so when you're building community, you really need to think about all of those impression pieces. What is the experience like for these members when they join? What is it like when they return? What is it like when they go to different spots within the community? By thinking about that experience, you're going to be more holistic and thoughtful in how you're presenting and really sharing what this can look like. So now that we know that it's important to think about community and what it can do, I'm going to have to talk to leadership, and I'm going to have to ask for resources, and I'm going to have to explain why community is important. And that usually comes down to ROI. Why should I give you a budget to pay for a platform? Why should I hire a community manager? Why should I invest time in something that's not going to be a quick win for us? What's in it for us? A lot of times, if you're presenting to leadership or you're presenting to anyone really, you need to be able to come from a place of what's in it for them. You need to be able to explain quite quickly why they should care and why they should benefit from your pitch. If you can get them to understand how it can be helpful for them, it'll be easier for you to get that buy-in that you need so that you can get the resources that are necessary for you to be successful. So when we think about that, what does community provide? It gives you love. It's going to give you that loyalty because you're going to have people who have that relationship with your brand or organization. They are going to be the ones that are stepping up to defend you. If you don't think community is important and you don't think loyalty counts, go online and watch someone make fun or say something mean about Taylor Swift and let me know what happens. She doesn't have to say a word. Her community rallies around her. They champion her. They will literally cut someone on the internet if they even look at her sideways. That loyalty is incredibly powerful. It's a movement if it's handled correctly. And that in itself gives you leverage. If I have an army of people who love what we do and who want to defend us and who want to share what we have, what you have is you have this powerful word of mouth that's going to be able to share the news of what you're doing greater than a paid ad would, because an ad's going to look like an ad. But when people are actively talking about you in a positive way, you believe that. We trust strangers over brands. We trust strangers over ads. But if you can find those opportunities and you can empower your community and let them know how important their voice is for you, That's going to give you leverage. That's going to help you build market share. That's going to help you build positive sentiment across social and across reviews and across other parts of the internet. And those opinions that you get from those reviews is going to tell you how you can improve. It's going to tell you what they love about your product, what they love about your service, what they would change. And most of the time, they're not just going to complain. They'll actually tell you the solution. So instead of R&D having to spend all this time and money and resources trying to figure out what we can do to improve it, chances are the answer is in your reviews. The answer is in your NPS. The answer is in those surveys that you're sending people saying, what would you like different? If you had a magic wand, what would you change? What would you add? They most likely won't just tell you what they want. They'll tell you what they want. They'll explain why it's important to them. And then they will usually either tell you about a competitor that does that, or they will tell you how they think it's possible to be done. That's your R&D right there. That's some market research, and that's a roadmap. You can collectively start figuring out what needs to be on your future roadmap so that you can improve the service, and then you can improve that. Now, what happens when you do that? What happens when you take those opinions and you listen? Imagine what they're going to do when you make that change. Imagine you go on social and you announce this new feature, and I am the one who told you that you should do that. I am not only going to take credit, I'm going to share it with absolutely everyone that follows me. I'm going to share it to people I haven't talked to in years because I have a sense of ownership in that post. I have a sense of ownership in that feature that you've added. And because of that, the organic reach you're going to get on that is incredibly powerful. That's why UGC works. You think UGC has to be pretty? Not necessarily. But when you highlight a customer and they see their content on your brand page, they feel seen, they feel appreciated, they feel special, they feel closer to that brand than ever before. And they will tell every single person they know, hey, you would not believe who put me on Instagram or TikTok today. You wouldn't believe who mentioned me on Twitter. They will take that time. They will increase your organic reach. They will make sure that people see that content because they have a sense of ownership. They feel like they have a seat at the table. And that only strengthens them because now you have that voice. The voice of the customer has to always, always, always be near and dear to your brand and organization because it is incredibly easy to grow and to scale and to feel successful, and then you think that there's nothing you need to improve on. And you forget that there are people who are using your product and service daily. You forget that there are people who are making money or doing what they need to survive using what your brand or organization does. And when you forget about your customers, you will take them for granted. You will stop ideating for them. You will remove them from the equation, and they should always be at the heart. The easiest way to make sure that you always keep them top of mind is you make them louder. Make them the hero. That's what we've done with HubSpot with our Hub Fans program. I've been privileged to launch and lead the program, and a lot of what I do is try to figure out how can I take our customers and partners who are incredibly knowledgeable, how can I give them opportunities to shine? How can I give them the microphone so that they have an opportunity to show off, to flex, and really showcase their subject matter expertise? And by doing that, they feel a deeper love for the brand. And they know that all of the love that they have for that brand is reciprocated. We appreciate them. We want to amplify them. We want to celebrate them. And that's going to further drive that love. So now that we have that, what does that look like in real life? How can we start building that? So I'm going to show one of my favorite pieces. I did not come up with this. It is pretty well known in the community industry. If you need to take a screenshot, you can. It is the community canvas. And if you go to community-canvas.org, you'll be able to see this page and be able to print it out. The reason I love this is that it does very much what Steve Blank's business model canvas did. If you're not familiar, Steve Blanks created the business model canvas, and it looks very similar to this. And instead of it being a minimum viable community, it's for a minimum viable product. Imagine if you could get the core pieces of your business plan onto one sheet of paper. onto one slide. That's what we're doing here. And so what it does is it makes you think about these core questions that you need to consider as to what has to be in place. What do you have to decide before you launch a community? So depending on who you are, answering these questions, not everyone's is going to look the same. It depends on your why. It depends on who you want to be in that community, what sort of behaviors are successful for that community, what kind of roles and rules are there, and what does that experience look like? How do we talk to each other in those communities? So if you want, take a chance, if you want to take a screenshot of this, and I can also put the link in the chat later. But it's an amazing exercise to really ground you and go to the root of community. It's incredibly tempting to go straight into like Google community platforms or create a Discord or create a Slack. I really recommend, if you want to build a community, if you want to start from scratch, try this first. It really will make you think about what's driving you, what your expectations are, and what you are willing to give and take when it comes to your community and its members. Now, this is something that is not necessarily used for community, but I absolutely adore it for community. This is a 4 spaces model that you see to the left. This is actually used for public libraries, specifically around like the 80s and 90s when they started redoing them to create spaces for children. And I find that it is such a beautiful way to think about how you can have community and how you can separate things for there to be individual behavior spaces within the community at large. And so depending on where you're at, depending on what your need is, you have this intersection of all of these types of learning, whether it be you want to be inspired and you want to be excited, or you want to actively learn and explore something, or you want to participate with others, or you want to create. But whatever that looks like, just as when we talk about social and you can have content pillars for education and entertainment, when you're looking at the community, it's really helpful when there are multiple places, where there are multiple ways to explore and be a part of that community. Forums are great, but forums aren't for everybody because of this setup. How can I be a part of a community if I don't have any questions? How can I be a part of a community if I'm shy and maybe I'm just looking for some other type of experience? How can I create multiple spaces in the community so that you can go in and you can feel like a valuable member without asking a question, without answering other people's questions? There has to be opportunities for people to celebrate being a member in their own way. I'm very much a firm believer of letting people choose their own adventure. I find that if you go to a community and there's only one way to behave, a lot of people will feel stifled. And if that desired behavior is not in line with their desired behavior, why are they going to return? Why do they want to be a part of something when the way they want to exist in the community isn't okay, isn't allowed? So thinking about this, and if you want to use this model, I highly recommend thinking about how would you use experience, empowerment, involvement, and innovation in your community. Now, a community that does an incredibly great job is Peloton. And I know that they've been in the news for quite some very bad reasons over the past couple months, but I think that actually proves what a great community it is. If you did any social listening, and I am on the internet social listening absolutely every day, you saw that even though there were news reports, the CEO stepped down, there were investigations, the stock was performing poorly. What you saw, though, is you saw the members of the community reaching out, being positive. The positive voice that you heard continuing to echo through the whole thing were the Peloton community members. They are aware of what happened. They saw the news reports like everybody else, but because of the community, because of those connections they've made, because of the way that the community has been there for them, they have no problem stepping up and defending them. So it's really interesting to see how this is broken up and how they really break it down into essentially core recipes into what makes a community. First thing is rituals. You can see this at a baseball game, at a football game. You'll see rituals. People wear a jersey, they'll wear a hat, they'll have chants, they'll do specific things at different times. And Peloton is no different. So those rituals would be you have the opportunity to get badges based on what kind of rides you're doing. You can high five others to really kind of reinforce that connection. When you are doing your 100th ride, you want to make sure that you're doing it on a live ride. So they will call you out and give you kudos and cheer and celebrate you and have everyone high five you and give you a lot of love. Most people have a favorite trainer or trainers, or they'll have a specific type of ride they like. If they like the Disney ride or a Broadway ride or an alternative rock ride, whatever that looks like. And then they give you opportunities to have micro communities within that. So the hashtags that you can add to your account will dictate and showcase what micro communities you feel like you're a part of. So Peloton Moms is usually the biggest. They do an amazing job. There are some hashtag groups that are specific to where people work, where they're located, what trainer is their favorite, but there's opportunities for you to, within this greater community, have these micro moments where it's far more intimate, where these people, we all have this in common, but within this micro niche, I have even more in common. I have multiple things in common, and it's not as big of a group, so I don't feel as overwhelmed. You can also do group rides so that you're able to connect with others. You're able to share the experience, and that just further helps you feel like you're connected to the brand, you're connected to other members, and then you can do that with UGC. You can highlight what part of the member of the community you are. You can wear their merch. You can use hashtags. You can go and create UGC. If you go on Instagram and you search Peloton, you'll see tons of people taking pictures beside their bike with these massive Mylar balloons spelling out 100. They want to celebrate and show off the milestones that they are doing in the community. And then Peloton uses a lot of that UGC to essentially celebrate those milestones for those people. So it's celebrating those community. And then they make it easier for you to join. I think my only issue with Peloton would be that I don't think they market the app well enough. You don't have to have the tread. You don't have to get the bike in order to be a part of the Peloton community. You can just as easily get the app, put it on your phone. You're able to listen. You're able to do whatever you would need. But there's multiple entry points. So there's not just one way to be a part of the community. There's not one entry point. And that makes it easier for people to feel like they can join. So here's the heavy part, but I hope that you will understand why I had to make it heavy. The next couple slides are going to break down specifically the questions that you need to be asking if you want to build a community from scratch. So feel free to take screenshots, feel free to take notes, whatever you need to do. But when we're thinking about setting things up from scratch, you need to ask these questions. And so for me, there's a lot of metaphors when it comes to community, but when we're talking about building from scratch, for me, it's incredibly like a garden. You need to make sure the soil is right. You need to clear any trees or debris. You need to make sure that it's healthy and it's going to have the nutrients for the type of flowers and plants that you want to build. You need to make sure that based off of what you want to plant, that you're inviting it and seeding it and planting it at the right time. You need to make sure that the conditions are in such a way. Is there enough sunlight? Is it too cold? You need to make sure that the conditions are set up so those plants have the best possible chance to be successful, to survive. And then once they grow, if they grow, then you need to constantly care for it, making sure it's having enough sunlight, making sure it has enough water, making sure that you're weeding it, and making sure that there aren't things there to disrupt it. And so it's very much the same process. You need to be thinking about, how can I create this space and make it so it provides the best ecosystem for the people, the plants that I want involved. So with planning, why does the community exist? And if you start with, it's going to make us money, you're already a step behind. You need to really think about your why. and think about why it's important to you. If it's just to make money, it's going to be hard because it's going to take a while to grow. And if it doesn't grow as quickly as you want and you don't see the money as soon as you want, it can be incredibly, incredibly devastating. And you're going to stop tending to your garden. You're going to stop doing those little steps every day to make it successful. It's going to feel tedious. So you really need to understand why we're doing this. And revenue can be a part of the overall thing, but think about from a customer, from a community, from a partner perspective, why do you want to connect with them? Why do you want a relationship with them? How can it be mutually beneficial? And then who is the community for? You don't want everybody. We already have a community for everybody. It's called Earth. So what do you want? Who do you specifically want in this community? And you can be as general or you can be as niche as you want. There is this misconception that community has to be huge. No, it doesn't. It can be a micro community. If the right people are there, the right people are there. And what makes that community right for them? What do they have in common? What is it about them that makes this the best community for them? What is it about them that makes this valuable? And where does the community live currently? Is there already, you could build, say like, hey, I don't see this, but I should build a community for this. Have you looked to see if there's a similar community that's already doing this? Where are they? Are they on Slack? Are they in a LinkedIn group? Are they on Discord? Are they on a competitors community? Where are they? Are they just on social, talking to each other here and there? Where are they now? And then do the people already identify as a community? What do they call themselves? This is an important question because imagine if you asked me to be a part of your community and you know that I call myself Christina. That's just my name. And you tell me, all right, here's a community for you. And we are the Sams. So you're a Sam. Never called myself a Sam in my entire life. But in order to be a part of this community, you think I should be called Sam. That doesn't make me feel like I belong. It doesn't make me feel like you thought of me. It doesn't feel like it's purposeful and like it's meant for me. But if I think about how people call themselves one thing, it can align them. It actually makes that bond stronger. Great example of this is we had HubStars in the past, which was our advocacy program. And when I brought it back, I changed the name to HubFans because when you talk to people who are HubSpot, people who love HubSpot, if I say like, hey, if you're a fan of HubSpot, people will raise their hand. If I say, are you a star of HubSpot? No one knows what that means. No one has a connection to that. But if I ask if you're a fan, you know what that means, and you will raise your hand if you self-identify in that way. And so it creates a stronger connection because it showcases that you're paying attention to them and that I want to align with how you self-identify. And then now that you have these people, now that you know who you want, what motivates them? What do they want? What do they care about? What's important to them? Is there a problem they're trying to solve? Do they want connection? If so, what kind of connection? What is important to them? What's going to be a draw for them so that you can make sure there is value in that community? And then how inclusive and exclusive is it going to be? What's the cutoff? Where do you draw the line between who can be a member and who can't? Now, the member experience. Now, I'm not going to read all these off, but I will stress that it is incredibly important to think about the member experience. It takes one bad experience to cloud a lot of good. And when you're trying to get people into the community, either for the first time or the second, third, or fourth, it's always important to make sure that you're not taking them for granted. It's incredibly crucial that you are ensuring that they have the best possible experience. If someone's mean to them and the person who's mean to them is saying things that are against the community guidelines, but you don't do anything to prevent that behavior or punish the person who does that, that person's going to feel like you're not doing your end of the bargain. You're not protecting the members. It could be that they are incredibly engaged in the community and they are answering questions and they are starting conversations, but you never give them positive feedback. You never give them positive reinforcement. You never say, I appreciate you. We love having you as a member of the community. Thank you so much for all the value that you bring here. It takes such a short amount of time to make people feel special, but we don't take that time. So when you see someone who is just starting, make them feel welcome. When you see someone who is clearly taking a lot of time to be a valuable member of a community, thank them. When you see someone who you know has been a passive or lurker, whatever you want to call it, lurker member of the community, and you see them finally ask a question, do whatever you need to do to make them feel less awkward. They really went out of their way. And for some of them, it feels like they're walking on the plank for the first time. Make them feel less awkward. Make them feel safe. Make them feel like they are appreciated. And make everything as easy as possible. There's a lot of really powerful Slack channels out there. It's one of the easiest platforms to use for communities. And it has absolutely nothing to do with it being a great community tool. It's because most people know how to use it. And so it's an easy entry point. There's not a lot of friction for people. So when you're thinking about who you need to have in the community, how much friction would be involved depending on where you build your community, how you build that community, how you get to it. If it feels like I'm on this endless journey to get to one place, you're betting on me having so much passion for this community that I'm willing to go through that journey. Don't do that. Make it as easy as possible. Make entry points make sense. Don't try to hide the way to your community. Focus on as minimizing friction as much as possible, and then make sure there's always a feedback loop. Do they feel like as a member that their feedback counts, that their opinions on things that they'd like to see in the future, that you will listen and put that in the roadmap, that you will make those changes? That's incredibly important. And think about when you're looking at your KPIs, when you're looking at the things that dictate whether or not you think this community is a success, if you focus on the people and what they need to do that behavior, the metrics will come. But if you are so focused on those metrics and those metrics alone, then those people will start to look like numbers to you instead of people. And that's the last thing you want to happen when you're looking at community. Those are humans, all living their own lives, all dealing with their own baggage and their own drama. And your community might be their one safe space. Your community might be the space where they feel the smartest. Your community might be the place that makes them feel like they could be successful. So focus on them and realize how important the community could be to them. So if I need engagement, if engagement is like top KPI for me, walk backwards, reverse engineer. What can I do to make it as easy as possible to engage? If I look at the UX, if I look at the user experience, does it create opportunities? Is it easy to engage? Is it obvious how to engage? Because you might have a community that wants to talk to each other, that wants to be passionate, that wants to be engaged, but it might be too difficult, or they might not know how. Really walk backwards. How can I make this environment better for them? How can I make it easy for them to do the things that I need them to do? By taking those steps, you are facilitating that journey for them. You don't want to make it harder on your crops to grow, on your plants. You want to make it as easy as possible. Give them what they need. And then community management. Now that we're building things out, you need to think about, from a management perspective, from an admin perspective, what tools are we using? Do we need to integrate with anything? Do I have a tech stack that I need to be considering and looking at? What kind of KPIs are we looking at? What kind of reports are we creating? How often are we doing reports? Are we doing monthly? Are we doing QBRs? Who gets those reports? Who in leadership needs to know what we're doing? What goals are we setting? What does success look like to us when we're setting goals in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year? And how are we launching? Are we going to launch all over the place? Are we going to push on social? Are we going to do email campaigns? Are we going to have ads? Are we going to have beta testers first to see how the community is looking and what people like, and if we're heading in the right direction? What kind of content are we going to be creating in the community? How are we going to be talking to each other? What are we looking at when we're building this ecosystem for our community members? And at the end, if you do all these things and you really consider what is in it for your community members, why it needs to be holistically and thoughtfully created for them, you realize that community is an incredibly powerful thing. You realize that getting people together with a common need, a common focus, can do incredible things. And so when we're thinking about community, yes, it takes a lot of time, but the best things take a lot of time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. That was great. I know there was a lot of great engagement in the chat. A lot of people really resonating with what you're saying, appreciating your expertise there. We did have a few questions come through that I want to get in front of you. So first of all, do you have a list or some names of some smaller brands that you feel are doing a great job at community building?
Yes, I would actually say that some of the best people who are doing community building right now are actually colleges and universities, because a lot of the alumni chapters, especially with more and more communities and more schools having to do fundraising, what you're seeing is that they realize the importance of their alumni as a donor base. So like, the motivation may not be right, but they're keeping those alumni groups engaged because they need to make sure they're engaged year round, so that when they talk to them at like once or twice a year for donations, it doesn't feel like I'm just talking to you about this and I ignore you for the rest of the year. So they want to, they need that relationship. And so what you're seeing is a lot of colleges are actually creating more and more alumni associations, because they need to tether themselves to those students once they graduate. And so, like I said, motivation's not great, but they are doing the work. Like, they're trying to find opportunities, and they have chapters at different places. They're really trying to make sure that it all comes down to relationships. And if you feel like the school has your back, and you feel like you're a part of it, and you feel like you have a sense of ownership, it's a lot easier to set that up.
Yeah, definitely. What's another question that someone had? What's your favorite channel or space for community building? And what's a channel that you maybe just have the most fun in that maybe isn't as effective?
Yeah, I love Community Club. Community Club, it's by Comsor, and they have a community just for community managers and community leaders. So it's a community for community. But it creates this really great opportunity for us to offer up an opportunity to learn from each other. And it's incredibly helpful because none of us has it all figured out. Like, we have all these opportunities and resources that we've either heard of or we've created. And so we really get to level each other up. So I really love that. I would say the one that's probably not as effective, but is helpful, is within the HubSpot, not community, but our internal Slack. We have a Marvel Slack, which I like to go and poke my head in. And it just makes me feel like the nerd part of me is still represented at HubSpot, even if I'm not talking about marketing or I'm not talking about community. And so from a community perspective, it gives me that sense of belonging without it being purely based on me being at HubSpot. It's the commonality is I'm a Marvel fan.
Awesome. And then one last question here that came through, and I know you referenced one just now, but what cool software out there to help support community building?
Yeah, a lot of social listening tools are starting to come up, which is incredibly important because you need to be able to understand sentiment within that. So like Charla is a great one. It's charla.cc. You can actually, if you have a Slack channel, it will go in and it will help you look for specific like keywords, sentiment, things like that. There's also Common Room. Common Room does a really great job where you're able to connect your communities and be able to find out like who are the main people who are talking about us, who could be a future advocate or could be a thought leader for us, things like that. But there's more and more coming up. So before it was very much platform, but now we're getting more and more into social listening, which is, for me, is incredibly important because I am an audience intelligence nerd.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. I know just from the chat that the audience really enjoyed it, and I know I myself really enjoyed it. There's a lot of takeaways I had. So thank you so much for your time and for bringing your expertise to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.